Well, I grew up in Campbell Valley, and I didn't really have much interest in art until I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I went on a sailing trip with school, and I remember sitting on the boat and drawing the landscape from the boat, and that was the first real memory I have of making art. After that, it was pretty much constant. A really hard time with school as a kid, with education, and so I finally found this fine arts high school in grade 10, and I went to that high school and got taught like all about painting. We did 3 hours of art every day almost, and it was like a massive learning experience for me. In fact, it was probably my sole art education was from this high school. I was really like big-headed about the whole thing. Like I just decided I was going to be an artist, and that's what my life path was, and I sort of knew that already. So it was whatever it takes to make this happen, I'm just going to do it. And it meant living in like some old shanty shacks for the first few years in Vancouver. First job as a designer was designing logos and presentations for logos and all this stuff. And then I started working as a freelance graphic designer for hip-hop artists and all around Vancouver, designing posters and for shows and CD covers and really grassroots kind of stuff. After that, I worked at an architecture and design studio it was a real change. I got this job designing like wall panels for a science and technology center in Saudi Arabia. And then after I worked there, I worked at a studio called Burn Kit, which is a small design studio in Vancouver here. And it was primarily interactive, so I learned a lot about interactive design, a lot about website design and how a website experience and this and that. And so I got really into like how to create these environments on the internet. And that was my job. Like I did that 9 to 5, and then I would go to the studio and paint for the rest of the day. So I was really involved in this digital world and also in this real physical world that were so different, because in the digital world for me was really fulfilling someone else's like expectations and vision, and you're really accommodating a client's. Always been very like inspired and fascinated with how people work together in the same space or environment. W2 for me was part of the community, because it's funny, like I knew W2 through Chris Krug. He introduced me to Erwin, who is the executive director, and Erwin started coming by my studio where I was painting every once in a while at night. We would hang out after work and talk ideas and talk community and talk about like bridging gaps between these different sort of subcultures in Gastown, and how do we make this really work. And so W2 started coming up, and I sort of immediately like latched onto it as like this this fundamental need that Gastown really needed, this civic place where people could meet together, and that didn't seem like it existed yet, at least not on a holistic kind of level. You know, like there was centers for the architects, and there were centers for the homeless people, and there were centers for this group, but there's no real center for everyone to come together in this creative environment at the same place. And so for me, that's a very exceptional idea and a very good addition to the community. I really think like this show, there's 18 paintings in the show, and I feel like all of the paintings that I do in my life will sort of equate to this novel of work, and this show is really only just a sentence in the novel. So the work in the show is quite bleak, and that it's black and white, and I think the reason for that is because of the move to Galliano and like literally trading like crazy like drug use in the back alley, to going from that to going to like hanging out with like Bambi and the family in my backyard, or in is a huge contrast. And so I started thinking like nature is it's so impossible to capture that in art unless you, like, it's just impossible. Like, nature is this thing around us, and so I started thinking about physical environments. I'd been so immersed in this digital place, you know, communicating with people and this and that, and so the fact that all these paintings are black and white for me is quite cynical, you know, like it's like, of course it's not the real person. It's, you know, it became more about the audience for me than it was about the painting. Like I almost wanted to make the paintings as bland, as black and white, as neutral as possible, so that the life of an audience would really light the room up. There's definitely like a subtle political charge to my work right now, and it talks about basically our attention span as like civilians, as Canadian citizens, as citizens of the world. Like, where is our attention span at? How responsible are we to our environment, and why? And I think like what I'm talking about in these paintings is, in a digital context, maybe we become more preoccupied with our life in a digital world than we do in a physical world. And maybe our responsibilities follow that, and we become less responsible to a physical place that we live in, and more responsible to this place that can answer any question at any time. And we have more, it's like this sort of feeling of control we have, and it drives us to that because we want control in our lives, and I think that's a desire that everybody has. So the internet feeds that digital landscape really feeds that, and so politically what I'm saying is, let's just step back and take a look at where our priorities are. Like, should we be more conscious of our physical environment? You know, like, are we paying attention to where they're drilling for oil? Are we aware of like the summits and conferences that are happening about like global currencies and those kinds of things, like really heavy duty issues that are sort of slipping past because we're sitting on Facebook all day and not really caring about our physical place? And so there are some pretty big issues there, but I feel like to make them relevant to everyday life, you can't really talk about this big umbrella issue. Like, you need to get into the principle of what it is, and in this case it's like where our attention is. Like, is it in this digital place or is it in this physical place?